I'm Emma Lubitsch for KNTV. Today we're speaking with Deatra Jackson, National Director of Black Youth Project 100, or BYP100. Thank you so much for being with us today. So BYP100 has been at the forefront of this fight since 2013. So since the inception of BYP100. So did you ever think that you would see the kind of sustained mass movement that we're seeing today?
Thank you so much for having me. Um, so BYP100 was formed out of a moment just like this, where there were massive uprisings, there were marches, there was calls around what the police are doing to Black people, young Black people across the country and across the globe. And we came out of the moment where George Zimmerman, who's the murderer of Trayvon Martin, got the announcement around the non-indictment of his charge. And so the organization was really formed out of the moment. It has grown nationally. And since then, we've been moving in the tradition of organizing around criminalization at large. So not just around police brutality and police accountability, but also the ways that surveillance affects our lives, also the way that different criminalized laws and policies and ordinances affects our lives, and police budgets. Just the many different ways that criminalization affects young Black people on a daily basis is some of the campaign work that we have been moving for since 2013.
And so what do you think are some of the conditions that kind of made this movement right now possible?
Yeah, some of the conditions that made this moment, I mean, I would say from between 2010 and 2020, this year, has been a year of really Black political insurgency, where there are constant iterations of different uprisings, moments of protest, opportunities for to interrogate its history, its long history, and its ingrained history of anti-Black racism. And I think this moment that we're in particular, that we're in a global pandemic where Black people are being disproportionately affected and also dying by the virus, and also economic recession, and probably soon to be Great Depression that we're in, where there is a massive amount of people that are unemployed, young Black people in particular. More than half of young Black people are unemployed in this country right now, and even in higher rates in some of the major cities that are predominantly Black, like Detroit, like Jackson, Mississippi, like New Orleans, and so I think those are the kind of conditions that really shape the type of organizing that we want to do, and the conditions that our folks are living in, which further amplifies the need for movement, the need for organizing, and pushing for transformative change.
And so can you talk about coalition building and kind of the strength of that in the movement right now?
Yeah, I think for me, so for BYP100, what we say is that we are an organization that is fighting for Black liberation and Black freedom through a Black queer feminist lens. Some of what that means for us is when we are thinking about the strategies and the campaigns and the issues that we're facing as Black people, we're thinking about who is the most directly impacted by this issue, whose stories are not being told, who's not at the table, to be able to bring in some more fuller answers and some more fuller solutions.
Right.
And so another way that we're able to express Black queer feminism, to me, is by building intentional coalitions with folks that are in alignment with us, with folks that we can build deep trust with, that we're able to do this work together in the long haul, and not just for to gain more money, not just to gain more people, but in a way that we're able to bring in more of our folks into deeper alignment to really transform our society, transform our systems, but also transform our behaviors. in the way that in the way that we see change happen with our hearts and minds. And so we build with organizations in many different capacities. We have coalitions that we're part of at the local level and our local chapters. We have 10 chapters across the country. And so all of those chapters have relationships, deep relationships with other organizations in their cities, but also at the national level, there are organizations that we have built deep trust with. A lot of those organizations are in the Movement for Black Lives ecosystem, but also organizations that are not in that ecosystem that we still know that we need to work with.
So I think on that note too, we're seeing a big shift in the national conversation that kind of moves to emphasize the necessity of not just including, but kind of following the leadership of LGB and specifically trans folks in the discussion of liberation. So that's been a part of the BYP100 platform for some time now. But can you talk about what the importance of inclusivity and kind of intersectionality within the movement is?
Yeah. So in BYP 100, from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that we uh, learned from the lessons of the organizers and the organizations in the Black radical tradition that has come before us, and then also answering what is right for our time. And what is right for the organizing that we want to do and the people that we want to do that organizing with. And that means that bringing more Black, queer, and trans young people into the conversation, into the fold, and into the overall organizing work of what we're trying to really achieve. Um, because we believe that bringing in those folks and to the center and into the conversation for the sake of transforming our conditions and transforming the politic that we're moving from. So it isn't just about representation, which I think representation is important, but it has a limit, because representation doesn't also articulate a politic. It doesn't actually articulate how people see the future. And so we're moving more of our folks that are at the margins into the center for the sake of transforming how we see the future.
So to change course a little bit, so BYP's stance has always been that economic justice and racial justice are kind of so intimately bound. So do you think that there can be a comprehensive movement without a discussion or a critique of how capitalism plays a role in perpetuating racial injustice?
Yeah, Emma, I think you know the answer to that question just from the way that you asked it. I think that I think like capitalism and the critique of capitalism, racial capitalism, sometimes we call it, but capitalism has always been racialized, so we don't need to say racial capitalism. But for the sake of conversation, we'll say racialized capitalism has been one of the roots and one of the major roots of why we live in a society that is so built and ingrained on individualism. It is so built and ingrained on there will be haves and there will be have-nots. But also understanding that that the U.S. As a country and one of the richest countries in the world, if that is the case, like there's a place to really interrogate that, because we do have enough resources to feed everybody. We do have enough resources to clean the water that we're drinking. We do have enough resources to clean the air that we're breathing, and yet it doesn't happen. Because it is around profit and it is around the protection of profit. And that's also how we see the police as a force that is there to protect profit and to protect property. And so we have to have this deep understanding of capitalism, because we have to understand our enemy to really understand ourselves and understand the movement work that is necessary. And what we've been saying, and I'm based in Durham, North Carolina, where we've been really pushing this narrative of cops, COVID, and capitalism are killing Black people, and spelling all of those out with K's, because there's a strong link between the fact that we actually don't have a healthcare system, And I think that this global pandemic has amplified that fact throughout, and continues to amplify it. It's like, it's not about, oh, the hospitals weren't ready, and our politicians were not ready, and our folks were not ready. Like, no, we don't have a healthcare system. We have a capitalist system that provides a process of deciding who gets access to health and who does not, which ultimately decides who dies and who lives, right? We also don't have a criminal justice system. We have a capitalist system that is providing a process of deciding who gets punished and who doesn't. And that is inherently, and because it is inherently racialized, it is how we are seeing the disproportionate amount of people that are in our prisons, that are charged with crimes, that are arrested, that are beaten, that there are whole major cities where the only people that are murdered by Black people, the only people that are murdered by police are Black people. Major cities, and not, and so we have to start from there. Like, we have to start from this interrogation of the capitalist system that we are all participating in, but also in deep critique and criminal interrogation of.
And so as an organization, you guys stand for the abolition of both police and prisons. So I think that the whole narrative about defunding the police, and then to a lot of people that means the eventual abolition of police, that's kind of in the forefront right now in the discourse. But can you talk about the prisons piece? Because I think that it's important to realize how prisons, specifically the for-profit prison industry, has kind of played a role in the Black community.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, if we were to look at the history of the police, or of slave patrols, that the police were built with the main goal was to criminalize, catch, beat, and be the jury and the judge for Black people in this country. And that has shown throughout history in many different ways, because it is ingrained in the system. And that and even after the quote unquote emancipation of Black people, that there was still a way for them to make sure that slavery exists in this country, and that is through prisons, where folks are forced labor, as a way of serving some kind of time or some kind of accountability to the community. But that isn't what that isn't what that is meant to be. It is meant for profit. It is not meant for the rehabilitation of anybody. It's not even meant for accountability. It's meant for punishment. And so for us, abolition is really about creating. It's about creating more possibilities. It's not just necessarily around burning down what exists and there being nothing there. It is actually around building more alternatives for our folks to be in deeper relationship with people, where we don't get to a place where folks are so violent against each other that the only way forward, the only future that people see forward for an individual is in a cage, right? And so there's a transformation of not just our systems, but also around, again, our behaviors and our hearts and minds around what's possible. I think that the capitalist system has been able to articulate that bad people do bad things, and so bad things must happen to them, right? Like, that's what we are taught. That's how we understand the punishment that is deserving, right? Like there are people that deserve to be punished, but we're also shown in that a lot of people are in there for nonviolent crimes. A lot of people are in there for survival means. I'm based in Durham. Most of the people that are in the Durham County Jail are there for poverty crimes, nonviolent poverty crimes, mostly like, stealing from people, stealing from individuals. And so putting someone in a cage is not going to resolve that. Having more police on the streets is not going to resolve that. There needs to be a different answer to why to people needing to steal. That isn't that a prison and the police cannot solve. And so we're constantly trying to push And this is not the first abolitionist movement that has existed in this country. um, but and that there have been police and prison abolitionists that have existed long before us and have done lots of work to even for us to even be where we are, to be able to say it so unapologetically that we are an abolitionist organization. And I think that our work is around creation. That's why it's so important for us to make sure that we are centering and strategizing with those that are most directly impacted, because those are the folks that really have the answers around what it means to transform the society.
And so BYP 100, you have an agenda for Black futures. So can you talk about that? I mean, I would encourage our viewers to read the full agenda themselves. It's extremely extensive. I'll link it at the end. But can you just provide us with kind of an overview?
Yeah, sure. So in 2016, we released our Agenda to Build Black Futures, which is our policy platform for economic and racial justice. And this was around the time that a lot of the fights around the minimum wage, the fights around raising the minimum wage to a livable wage and $15 an hour, and the fast food workers were going on strike every day. This was around that time. And so we wanted to make sure that there was something that was coming from our movement, coming from young Black people that are facing serious economic, just even without the moment that we're in right now, just the amount of just student debt, right, which is a very particular thing for our generation of young Black people and folks that are get that are receiving the most debt are like young Black women, um, folks that are going into careers and jobs that they deeply care about that also pay less, and there isn't a way forward around the pay being what it needs to be, and also receiving the most debt because those things require the most schooling. So particularly folks that are young Black women that are teachers, young Black women that are in social work. Those are the places where the pay is not deserving. Along with uh, there's the student debt aspect of it, but there's also the context of Black women are the whole equal pay thing. Like we don't. I don't even remember the number. I think it's like 66 cents to the dollar of a white man or something like that. Um, and that on top of the already debt of like the Black women's wealth. And so we wanted to make sure that the amount of the average Black women's wealth is about $100 and across the country. And that's including the Oprahs, that's including the Beyoncés, that's including all the other rich Black women, that the average amount of Black women's wealth is $100. And so we wanted to make sure that we're pushing on that framework in our agenda of like valuing Black women's work as being the backbone of this country, and always has been, of like Black women really making and shaping this economy. And yet we have the most debt, and yet we receive the least pay. And so we wanted to make sure that in this conversation around raising the minimum wage that we built on the context of the particular stories of Black folks, Black queer folks, young Black people, and what we're going through.
Yeah. And so do you think that this moment brings people closer to seeing the goals that are set out in the agenda becoming a reality?
I mean, that's the plan. That's the plan. The policy platform was written in 2016, so it feels old, but it doesn't feel that old. You know, it feels very applicable to the moment of us pushing for divestment from policing and from prisons, and investment into our communities. I think that there's something new that we could also be pushing. And I'm thinking about this coalition that we're in that can also help with this. But specifically, we're in this coalition that in campaign called the People's Coalition for Safety and Freedom. And the goal of our campaign is to repeal and replace the 94 crime bill. And the 94 crime bill has many different factors that have affected Black people over the past 16 years. Things like the 3 strikes, and different ways that they criminalize social welfare, social safety nets, just a number of things that have been, and just the growth of mass incarceration also. The expansion of mass incarceration is really owed to the 94 crime bill. And so when thinking about how do we as abolitionists be in a place to say that we are going to repeal and replace the 94 crime bill. And what that means is that we need to bring more of our people into this process and not relying on folks in Congress and folks in Senate and folks in the House of Representatives and all of that to be the shapers of ultimately what the things that really impact our lives. And so in our coalition, in our campaign, we will be going through this people's process, which will bring more of our folks in. We're bringing in young people. We're bringing in Black, queer, and trans folks. We're bringing in migrants. We're bringing in formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated people, or folks that have been impacted by the system in some kind of way into this fold of imagining, envisioning, and planning and organizing around what the replacement of the 94 crime bill is. And I think that can also be a place where we really exercise our abolitionist muscles.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah.